Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the fascinating and totally impartial truth behind the FDA data on GLP-1 medications. You've definitely seen the headlines, the social media buzz, maybe even the stock market waves. But beyond all that noise, there is a decades-long scientific journey, some really rigorous clinical trials, and some serious medical warnings that we all need to understand. We're going straight to the source material today to figure out exactly what these drugs do, how they're regulated, and what the clinical data actually tells us.
Okay, let's dive right into this incredible medical detective story. And honestly, it starts in the most unlikely place, with a sluggish creature out in the Arizona desert. The Gila monster is this armored lizard that spends most of its time underground. Now, it does something totally remarkable. It can go months without eating, and when it finally does, it devours a meal equal to a third of its own body weight in a single sitting. And then, it just stops. Perfectly. No binging, no metabolic chaos, no weight gain. For decades, nobody really cared about this lizard, until one scientist decided to look just a little closer at its saliva.
And that one discovery sparked a phenomenon of just sheer unprecedented scale. To put this in perspective, right now, 1 in 8 American adults is taking a GLP-1 medication. 1 in 8. That incredible off-label demand is exactly what caused those nationwide drug shortages you've heard about. But look at the flip side. Because of these medications, 7.6 million fewer Americans have clinical obesity compared to just 3 years ago. The U.S. obesity rate is actually falling for the first time in modern medical history. It's a real game changer.
Part 1. The Desert Discovery, Lizard Venom.
So this unlikely breakthrough began back in 1992. Dr. John Ang was a researcher working at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in New York, and he had this theory. He thought something in the Gila monster was helping it manage its blood sugar with absolute precision. Sure enough, he identified a specific peptide in its venom called Xendin-4. Here's why that matters. Us humans, we produce a natural hormone called GLP-1 that manages our fullness, but our version breaks down in the bloodstream super fast, in under 2 minutes. Xendin-4, though, it mimicked our human hormone, but it stuck around for hours. Major pharmaceutical companies actually passed on his discovery at first, but Dr. Ang just kept pushing.
Part 2. How GLP-1 works. The mechanism.
To really understand how these drugs reframe everything we thought we knew about appetite, let's look at what's actually happening inside your body. When someone without obesity eats a meal, their gut naturally releases GLP-1. What these synthetic molecules do, the ones born from that lizard venom research, is essentially flood the system with a massively amplified version of your own natural signals. By tweaking the molecule's chemistry just a bit, scientists got it to bind to proteins in the blood, stretching its lifespan from 2 little minutes to a full week. So with a single injection, the drug triggers your pancreas to release insulin, physically slows down how fast food empties from your stomach, and sends a powerful, constant signal to your brain that you are full. And it does that for 7 straight days.
Part 3. Approval Timeline, FDA Milestones. Now you might be wondering, did this just pop up out of nowhere? Actually, no. Tracing the FDA milestones reveals a very careful, decades-long progression. It kicked off in 2005 when the FDA approved Byetta, which came directly from that Gila monster research to treat type 2 diabetes. Fast forward to 2014, and we got Saxenda. That was a big deal because it was the first time a GLP-1 was approved explicitly for weight loss. But June 2021 was when everything truly changed. The FDA approved semaglutide under the brand name Wegovy, built specifically for chronic weight management. And the innovation hasn't stopped. In late 2025 and 2026, the whole weekly injection barrier finally fell, with the FDA approving oral pills, like the Wegovy pill and Eli Lilly's Foundayo.
And the reason that 2021 Wegovy approval shook the world is right here. The clinical trial showed unprecedented efficacy. We're talking patients achieving an average of 15 to 25% body weight loss. Before GLP-1 agonists, numbers like that were pretty much only achievable if you got bariatric surgery. Past generations of diet drugs either gave you barely noticeable results or caused severe, even fatal side effects. This was an entirely new frontier in medical science.
Part 4. The shadow market. Compounding risks.
But of course, that massive off-label demand triggered a nationwide shortage, and that led us straight into the dangerous emergence of a multi-billion-dollar shadow market. Because the name brand drugs were out of stock, compounding pharmacies started churning out their own versions. Here's the huge problem with that. The FDA does not evaluate compounded drugs for safety, effectiveness, or quality. You're flying blind. Some of these compounders are giving patients dosing instructions in vague units instead of standard milligrams. Because of that confusing ambiguity, the FDA has received reports of patients ending up in the emergency room with severe abdominal pain and vomiting. They literally injected too much because the instructions were so unclear. So the FDA has aggressively cracked down. In September 2025 alone, they fired off over 50 warning letters to shut down the false marketing of these unregulated generics. FDA Commissioner Marty Makary announced some serious intensifications against this practice. The takeaway from the FDA is absolutely clear. If you are going to take these drugs, they have to come from an approved source and be prescribed by an actual licensed provider.
Part 5. FDA warnings, clinical risks.
Okay, Let's dive into the hard clinical data, because that extraordinary weight loss is really only half of the medical picture. If you read the FDA prescribing information for Wegovy, you'll see a severe boxed warning. It points out that in rodents, semaglutide causes dose-dependent thyroid C-cell tumors. Now, to be clear, it's still unknown if it causes these tumors, like medullary thyroid cancer, in human beings. But because of that potential risk, the drug is strictly contraindicated, meaning you absolutely no questions asked should not take it if or your family have a history of this specific type of thyroid cancer. And looking objectively at the trial data for the more day-to-day side effects, nearly 44% of participants in the Step 1 semaglutide trial experienced nausea. 44%. That's compared to just 17% for the placebo group. The FDA also notes that diarrhea, vomiting, and constipation are significantly more common. Plus, real-world data covering over 13,000 cases shows an uptick in things like flatulence, bloating, and even weird temperature complaints like chills and hot flashes.
Beyond the gastrointestinal stuff, the FDA warns of some serious acute risks too. The prescribing label explicitly says doctors need to monitor for acute pancreatitis, gallbladder disease, acute kidney injury from dehydration, and even suicidal behavior and ideation. They even added a warning in late 2024 about a risk of pulmonary aspiration during general anesthesia, simply because the drug physically slows down stomach emptying. This all perfectly reinforces exactly why these medications require strict, ongoing supervision by a licensed medical professional, and not just filling out a quick 5-minute questionnaire online.
Part 6. A New Paradigm. Understanding Obesity.
All of this clinical data builds to what I think is the most profound medical realization of this entire explainer. Think about it. For generations, society treated excess weight as a moral failing, right? Like it was just a discipline problem. But the clinical data now definitively proves that obesity actually has a biological architecture. It is, in a very significant measure, a hormonal condition where the body's natural signaling system is just out of whack. These drugs finally shatter that generation-long myth that obesity is just a lack of willpower. It proves once and for all that it can be treated biologically.
But here is the catch. Because it is a chronic biological condition, this treatment isn't a permanent one-and-done cure. Data published in the British Medical Journal revealed that when patients stop taking weight loss injections like Wegovy, that hormonal disruption just comes right back, and that causes weight to rebound 4 times faster than if you had stopped a conventional diet and exercise routine. The American Diabetes Association emphasizes that these medications often require a long-term commitment to prevent that weight from coming back. It's exactly like how you wouldn't just stop taking your blood pressure medication the second your blood pressure normalizes.
Yet the overarching societal impact here is undeniable. Despite the medical risks, the high costs, and the need for a long-term commitment, the U.S. adult obesity rate dropped down to 37% in 2025. That is down from a record high just a few years prior. The data directly links this historic, unprecedented decline to the simultaneous rise of people using GLP-1 drugs.
So the crucial point we want to leave you with is this. A venomous lizard hanging out in the desert literally helps science unlock a treatment that is completely rewriting human health. But as we finally move past the toxic myth of willpower and accept that obesity is a chronic biological condition, we have to ask ourselves, if the cure for this epidemic requires ongoing, maybe even lifelong medical intervention, how are we going to navigate the long-term future of chronic care? It's a huge question, and it's one that millions of patients and our entire healthcare system are going to have to figure out together.